It's the early 1990s. I'm a Naval Flight Officer in Fighter Squadron 211. My heart races as the world slows down. My mind is processing thousands of bits of information a second as I try and determine what the next step is. Nothing less than the future of young Petty Officer Aaron Gill is at stake. You'd think I was about to go on a search and rescue mission because Gill was captured or behind enemy lines. I couldn't be farther from the truth. You see, Petty Officer Gill was new to the squadron, and he had just gotten in trouble. And it was my job as legal officer to have, that uncomfortable counseling conversation with somebody. How many people have been in that position, right? You got to talk to somebody. I had just been through years of training to learn how to fly and fight the F-14. They had spent countless hours and dollars helping me learn what to do in every situation, except for this one. I was breaking out in a cold sweat. I had no idea what to say. Now, you've probably all seen it. My mind flashed to the movies. The sailor's in trouble, and he comes into the commanding officer's office, and he gets braced. Stand at attention. Eyes front. Don't look at me. And then he gets berated. You're worthless. You don't deserve the uniform you're wearing. You're a waste of human flesh. Now, I started working at 13 years old. I wasn't always a great worker. I had actually been on the receiving end of that conversation. Anyone with me on that, right? Come on. I'm not alone. What's that do for you? The best that can do is motivate somebody to avoid that conversation in the future. All that does when you yell at somebody is raise the basement of performance. Now, I had a chief petty officer when I first joined the Navy. He said, "Sir, as a lieutenant, your job is not to tell people what to do. Your job is to remove the barriers that keep them from performing their jobs at peak efficiency." Think about the difference there. Raising the basement or achieving the best. Chewing them out would be not doing my job. And the irony here is that Petty Officer Gill got in trouble for dereliction of duty, which sounds really egregious, but really just meant he wasn't doing his job well. So the irony wasn't lost on me. I could either not do my job, get out the easy way, and yell at him for not doing his job. Does that make a lot of sense? In fact, I would be modeling the very behavior I'm trying to eliminate. Or I could figure out how to do my job. What I didn't realize at that time, but now today, the benefit of 35 years of leadership and hindsight, is that I had hit upon the first of the three elements of my accountability triangle. The accountability triangle is the three elements that must be present to create a culture of accountability in your organization. That is a culture where people do what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it. They do it right the first time. And while mistakes are tolerated, repeated mistakes are not. A culture of accountability is one where individuals are accountable to themselves. They're accountable to their team members, and they're accountable to the mission. It's an all-encompassing concept. And the first and most important aspect of this is model. As leaders, we must model the behaviors we want to see. I remember the first time I was confronted by one of my clients, one of my executive coaching clients, when he said to me, I have a problem with somebody who is constantly showing up late. Anybody have that person working for them? I want you to do this exercise with me. Answer these questions, because this is what I said to my client. I said, tell me something. Do you start every meeting on time? He said, no, I'm the boss. Okay. Do you show up when you say you're going to be there? He said, most of the time. Do you ever hold an impromptu meeting for something that's not critical in terms of time? It's not an emergency. He says, sure. In other words, you don't respect your team members' times, and you're asking them to respect yours. Yeah. We must embrace those very behaviors. The first step. Of course, this didn't help me with what do I say to Gil. I still had to figure that out. Now, my dad flashed into my mind. See, he was a teacher. I grew up in Philadelphia, and he was a teacher in one of the worst neighborhoods of Philadelphia, a neighborhood called Kensington. Anyone from Philly here? Right? Yeah, thank you. Well, my sister from across the river in New Jersey, they want to be in Philly. That's the problem. So Kensington, if you saw the movie Rocky, that's Kensington. There is generational poverty in Kensington, generational welfare. My dad taught for 39 years, and he taught at the end grandchildren of his very first students. And the grandchildren were on welfare just like their parents and their parents' parents. But he had a higher than average success rate in getting people out of poverty. By that I mean getting them to college and to succeed. And I remember as a young adult asking him about this, and what he said to me sits with me to this day because it was just so wise. He said, you know, we have this tendency to tell people, this is why it's important to you. And the problem with that is that that person gets to make that decision. You know what? You're wrong. I don't need to know trigonometry. I'll never use that. We need to relate it to why it's important to others. See, anthropologically, as human beings, as we were evolving over 300,000 years, and we're hunter-gatherers, we relied on each other for survival. And while I might be willing to let myself down, I can't let the tribe down because literally lives were at stake. And that's for 300,000 years it's been that way. In fact, survival has only not been an issue in this country for about 250 years, since the advent of the Industrial Revolution. So it's baked into our DNA not to let down the tribe, tie things to other people. So now I know what to say. Petty Officer Gill shows up at my office, pounds on the door. Petty Officer Gill reporting as ordered. Come on in, Gill. Grab a seat, close the door. Now, as I mentioned before, movies will have you, Hollywood will have you bracing him in public and telling him where he's a mess up. This is the last thing you want to do with an underperformer. Because in public, people get defensive. They start justifying to themselves their actions. Oh, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm out in the field. I'm the guy doing it. They're closed to listening to you. And when you brace them, of course, they're all tense. Shut the door. Do this in private. And then I proceeded to talk to Petty Officer Gill as a human being, one to another. Gill, you know we're working 18-hour days. Everybody is working hard. Imagine for a second that instead of being in the janitor department like you were in the electronics department, which is where you want to be. Imagine for a second you're working hard all day, working on the electronics of the aircraft, and at the end of the day, you show up in the bathroom to clean up before you go back to the barracks because you know you're just going to rinse, repeat, and do it all over again. And you walk in, and the bathroom is a mess. There's toilet paper on the floor. There's no paper towels. You go to wash your face, and it's filthy. You can't even see yourself in the mirror. How would that make you feel? You probably regret joining the Navy. And then maybe the next day, you're so ticked off that you're distracted, and you miss something vital in the aircraft. And now it goes up for a test flight, and something bad happens. And best case scenario, we have to fix what you should have fixed the first time, and days get even longer. But worst case, we lose the aircraft, and maybe the air crew. All because the janitor didn't do their job. Or the other happens. You come in, the bathroom is shiny, it's clean, it's absolutely sparkles. And at that point, you just feel good because you know the entire team is pulling together. You're not the only one working hard. You, as a janitor, have the ability to affect the morale of everybody else in the squadron. Also, and by the way, folks, breaking story here for a second, now I can tie it in to him. Do you think the chiefs don't know that you don't like what you're doing? Of course they do. Imagine if for a second, though, you did the best you could. No matter what, you always did your best. Do you think the chief's going to say, oh, we got to keep him as a janitor? No, they're going to say, we need to take you as an electronics technician because we know when you do what you love to do, you're going to do that much better job. Bloom where you're planted. I promise you, if you do the best job you can, no matter how terrible the job may be, you'll never do a job you don't like doing for long. And I sent him on his way. Now, this happened over 35 years ago. And I honestly wouldn't remember this story at all. This would have been not even a blip on my radar, except for something that happened 9 months later. 9 months after these events took place, we were on our way back from a Western Pacific deployment. We made our last port of call, which is always Pearl Harbor. You see, Pearl Harbor is the first port of call for West Coast sailors on our way out because we pick up the weapons, load up the ships, get ready. And on a good deployment, we stop there on the way back to drop off the same weapons we picked up. And we pick up something else, something really special. We pick up tigers, no, not the animal. Tigers are what the Navy calls friends and family who get to ride the ship with you back from Pearl Harbor to San Diego. And my dad was with me. I go to pick my dad up at the airport, and as I approach him, he's standing with two other people, one who I recognize as Petty Officer Gill, and the other is an older gentleman, turns out to be Gill's father. I grab my dad, I give him a big hug, I grab his bags, put them in the back of my Jeep. We're driving away. My dad looks at me and he goes, son, that petty officer has a lot of respect for you. I remember looking at him and going, I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. I mean, I know him from the squadron, but he's never worked for me. And then my dad told me the story I just told you from Petty Officer Gill's perspective, but it's what he said next that sat with me. He said he credits you with saving his career. I was stunned. I was 28 years old, and by accident, I had discovered the power of leadership, how we impact the lives of others. So as you leave here today, what I would ask of you is the following. Care about your people. Model the behaviors you expect of them. Set them up for success. Get them thinking about others. And I promise you, everybody will do more and better. Thank you.